and a translation that I posted for you to see in the chat. It'll be a verse that we're going to discuss. And so let me just pull it up on my phone here so I have access to it as well. Okay. Well, at the risk of being repetitive, we are in the throes of a really serious pandemic. And I wrote about it today on Instagram. And I quoted a verse there, and there wasn't time. You only get 2,200 characters in an Instagram post. It generally takes me about 2,200 characters to like say good morning or something like that. So it's not enough for me to ever do what I want to do. I usually write 4,000 characters and then cut it in half and say a half of what I want to say. And even then, I don't get to finish my thoughts. So I thought I would talk about what I didn't get a chance to deal with in my post in today's class. Anyway, to warm up, we are in the belly of the beast of this pandemic. I imagine the next couple of months will be the worst months we ever have. By next year, come winter, the vaccine will have been around for a year. A lot of people will have passed away, and it'll be much more mild because the numbers of vulnerable people will have thinned out because people have died or gotten it, gone to the hospital and made it through and developed the antibodies. But anyway, we have this zoonotic disease, this disease which was caused by the animal slaughter industry. Most of the coronaviruses are zoonotic and enter into human society because animals have any number of diseases that they are susceptible to that just they don't work with human hosts. Our biology doesn't work for those bioagents, and so they don't develop into viruses. And they don't turn into something that actually affects us. A virus itself is a bioagent. It requires a host to live on. It's an incomplete life form in itself. It requires a host to adhere to. And animals have any number of them. And most of these coronaviruses, I think all of them actually, all 7 of them, came from animals originally. And then they jump. We hang out with animals too much. And they keep trying to attach to us. And then eventually they mutate. And they're able to infect a patient 0. And then that patient infects other people. And if you have the wrong R naught, basic, rate of transmission, that's not exactly that, but it's how many people you infect before you get cured, and before you develop antibodies yourself and become non-infectious. And if you have a high enough R naught, and one person infects 5, and each of them infects 5, that's 25, and each of them is 125, and each of them 5, 625, and within just a few steps, you have an epidemic that's in a local area, and if those people travel, you get a pandemic, and it's everywhere. So you have to bring that R naught down below 1 somehow or other, even to 0.9, and then the pandemic or the epidemic will die out. That's why in, less free societies like China, they just tell people you're not allowed to leave your house, and that's it. And they just tell people you're not allowed to go to work, not allowed to open your business, not allowed to leave your house. They just shut huge sections of the country down if they need to. And if those people aren't able to infect others, then within a couple of weeks, the curve flattens. And that's where the whole flattening the curve, because you get this exponential surge, because it's like 525, 125, 625, 3,000, 125, and then 15,625, and then 75,000, 78,000, and 78,125, and then 300, almost 400,000, and it just keeps spiking up like that. And that's where we are right now. We're this huge exponential spike if you look at the cases. And so you got to stop that. How do you stop it? You don't let people infect others. How do you stop them from infecting others? You quarantine people. If you come in contact with somebody, you got to contact trace everybody. If you get sick, you contact trace everybody. You call them all up and you tell them. We didn't really do that so much now. It's becoming more in vogue to tell people you had coronavirus. It wasn't so popular before. Now people are more willing to admit it. It's not as big of a deal because so many people have it. It used to be like you have the cooties or something like that. In other countries, there's just no choice. They contact trace on your behalf. The police come and say, who have you been with? Who have you seen? Who have you talked? Who have you touched? Etc. Sometimes we say within 6 feet of people, but that's actually not even true. The disease gets aerosolized. And so if you're in a closed room, it can hang in the air for an hour. You got to open the windows, then it dissipates. Some Japanese researchers did this. It dissipates very quickly, but in a closed space, you're in trouble. Wintertime is trouble because everybody's in closed spaces together. They close the windows, they don't open them. If you live in Southern California, it's mildly inconvenient. If you live in other countries, other places of the country, even this country, you could die by leaving the windows open. You just can't do it. We can roll our windows down when we drive, but other places, they can't do that. It's wintertime, it's drier, it hangs in the air more. Anyway, you have to force people to quarantine, and then if they have it, they have to isolate. Quarantining is actually more difficult. If you isolate, you can go hang out with other people who have it because you all have it and you're developing antibodies. If you might have gotten it, you have to quarantine. It's different. Isolating and quarantining are two different terms. If you have to quarantine, it means you have to stay alone without anybody else, because if you and 5 other people got exposed, only one of you might get sick, so you can't quarantine together. You have to be separated from everybody else. It's a major inconvenience. Even at our restaurant, anytime somebody gets sick, we send them home. Don't come back for 2 weeks or come back after you get tested. The CDC recently relaxed their guidelines to some extent, 7 to 10 days if you get a test, no symptoms, instead of 2 weeks. 2 weeks was always a little bit overkill. Anyway, so you have to do that. You have to essentially shut society down. And then it flattens that curve out and you can start it again. And the original coronavirus, what was called the Spanish flu, I found out why it was called the Spanish flu. Everybody was in World War I. The Spanish flu happened during World War I. So everybody was in World War I. And therefore the government was censoring media and not reporting what was actually happening. So there was only, some countries that weren't involved in World War I didn't have censored media. And Spain was one of them. And so Spain was reporting that the coronavirus was wreaking havoc, and their prime minister got it. Or their king, I can't remember what it was. But some member of their government, it might have either been a royal person or it might have been the prime minister, got it. And so it was all publicized, and people started thinking, oh, it's like there, it's in Spain. But in Brazil it was called the German flu. And in Africa it was called the Brazilian flu. And so everybody was blaming somebody else from where it came from. It actually came from the U.S., but cases also sprang up in England, right around the same time. So we don't know exactly where it came from. There wasn't as much tracking as there is now. The world wasn't set up like it is now. But there were 4 waves of it. Spring and fall 2018, and then again in 2019, and again in 2020. And by the time it was all said and done, it killed 25 or more likely 50 million people. Some people even say 100 million people. That's 1.5 to 6% of the world's population died. 500 million people caught it. That's 1/3 of the world's population, which was 1.5 million people at the time. And it changed the world. I mean, it's like the bubonic plague or something. That was even worse, but that was 700 years ago. It was awful. It was catastrophic. And we've had 6 more coronaviruses since then. Some are way more deadly than even that first one was. SARS and MERS, sudden acute respiratory syndrome, and Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, depending on where they came from. I think SARS was in China as well, Japan also. I think MERS was in the Middle East in the summertime. But you gotta go through this massive pain of quarantining people, contact tracing everybody they come in contact with, and then quarantining everybody. If you do that within a few weeks, practically speaking, the virus dies out because nobody's getting anybody sick. But it's really extreme measures, and especially for Americans. It really chafes. It really rubs us against the grain, so we resist it. And summer was our friend. Now winter's around the corner. It's here. I mean, we're in December. It's freezing cold everywhere. We think it's freezing cold because it gets down to 55 or something like that, or 50. God forbid. In other places, it gets up to 30 or 20 or 10. And then drops well below zero. So people you're going to die if you don't close the doors. It's very difficult to separate and quarantine from people. So our spike is just going up, and it's overwhelming our healthcare system. This happened in Italy. There weren't enough ventilators. It happened in New York. And then you can't treat people, and people are just dying left and right because your healthcare system fails. So that's what happens. The R naught hits. Too many people require serious medical attention. You don't have enough beds in the hospital. You don't have enough ventilators. And your healthcare system gets overwhelmed. It fails, and tons more people die than have to die. Eventually, it dies out on its own, but it just keeps spiking and spiking. It's like the stock market. Your stock is going up and up, and you're like, do I sell, do I sell, do I sell? And you just want to ride it all the way, And so you just have no idea. They're expecting a couple 100,000 people to die, more or less doubling what we've experienced so far, but in the next couple of months, by through February. And so things are going to get worse before they get better. The only thing you can do is shut things down. They shut down restaurants. They should shut down Target and places like that. But anyway, they shut down restaurants. They're only responsible for 3% of the cases in Los Angeles. But they shut them down, and they leave still going other things which are present much more danger. Restaurants with outdoor dining are only responsible for 3% of the cases. If they shut down the bars, that would probably knock that number down to 0.5%. It's actually not that huge of a risk, but people are scrambling, trying to figure it out, and we're down to I don't know if you guys have read, but we're down to in some areas of California, we are under 10% of available beds in hospitals are open. So hospitals are almost at capacity, but the cases just keep going up. They just keep going higher and higher and higher. And the problem there is then you have no beds in the hospitals. They have to turn people away, and people who don't need to die start dying because of improper health care. Most of the deaths of the original coronavirus were because of subsequent infections and improper sanitization. It wasn't even because of the coronavirus itself. It was actually a relatively mild strain of the coronavirus. But people didn't get proper health care. They didn't have proper sanitization. Germs were sort of just, people were just beginning to understand all that stuff. I mean, it happened in the prior century, but it was still, we didn't understand sanitization the way we do now. And so it was way worse than it had to be. So we're obviously going to fare way better if we had similar results as the 1918 flu pandemic. We would lose, 75 million to, on the upper estimate, 400 million people, 450 million people, 75 to 450 million people. Like an exponential increase in the, to a factor of 10. At a full order of magnitude, like more than we've lost. Like just huge numbers. Huge numbers. Multiple orders of magnitude. More than what we've lost. So, everybody should stay safe. Everybody should perform the austerities. Now is the time to perform austerities. Things are really tough now. Maybe you're okay, but then the person you give it to is not. And so we got to figure some way out to just make it through and shut things down enough that it calms down, and hopefully the vaccine comes and then it doesn't peak again and spike again. But there were 4 waves in 1918, that pandemic, and it was absolutely catastrophic. They say decimate. Decimate means like destroy. It doesn't actually mean it. It means from desa. It was the Roman practice that if you failed in battle, they would take your unit and they would kill 10% of your people for cowardice. So you had like 100 men in your unit. They would kill 10 of them to punish you guys. That was decimation, to kill 10%. Tithing is like giving a tenth of your income to charity. So, we're not even going to decimate our population, but we're certainly going to lose a ton of people. Everybody knows people who've died now. And there's there's pre-existing health conditions, but you can account for those. You can calculate how many people died in 2019 of heart attacks, how many people died of strokes, how many people died of all the major things that people die from, cancer. And then you can look at the numbers of those things and then the coronavirus numbers, and you're up. Maybe you're not the whole amount, but you're up close. It's like there's close to an extra couple 100,000 deaths. And depending on your calculations, sometimes there's more. Because people died who wouldn't have died from those diseases, and they would have lasted until the following year. So yeah, things are really tough. And so anyway, we shut the temples down. We shut the farm down to outsiders. My restaurant is just doing takeout now. I'm helping people to contact trace. I'm helping people to get tested. And we're counseling people. People are you can't, normally we would go to the hospital and be with people when they're dying. We can't do that anymore because they won't let you in. So we end up giving comfort to the families without being able to comfort the individuals as much. And then sometimes we have to help people who are grieving the loss of a loved one. We've had several people die in our extended community, not within the temple community itself, but within the extended community. And then you have to make funeral arrangements, and that's also difficult. That's really challenging because you can't always go, so you have to give people directions what to do, or sometimes you're allowed to go depending on what month of the year it was. Right now, you can't even go to the funeral. You have to just give people directions what to do. It's a really bad situation. And we should take it seriously and do our part. We shouldn't be lazy or laissez-faire or cavalier or negligent. We should be responsible. That said, I'm not afraid of this. I'm not afraid of this. I'm okay. And I want to clarify what that means. There's visceral fear, which is your survival mechanism, which means if somebody attacks you, you're going to do your absolute best to breathe or to fight or to survive. That's a largely unconscious process. And that type of fear is it's almost it's a survival mechanism. I still have that. I don't have a death wish. I'm not foolhardy. And that type of fear is only overridden when somebody's in danger and that desire to protect overrides your natural inclination towards self-preservation, and you step into harm's way, or you leap into the breach once more, my friend, into the breach. You put yourself in danger to protect somebody else. That's not the type of fear I'm talking about. That type of fear goes away when your desire to protect supersedes your desire for self-preservation, and you give your life for a great cause, or sometimes for a stranger, but it's your desire to protect becomes more relevant to you, and you make that decision in that critical junction, that critical moment. It's a conscious decision, or I don't know if it's unconscious or conscious. I've leapt into the breach several times. And so I can say, actually, I haven't died from it, but I've come close. I can say it's not so conscious. You just do it. You just act. You move. It's called heroic compassion. It can be towards friends or family or strangers. It has all the features of a regular compassion, but it involves putting yourself in harm's way. Automatically. It's just sort of part of your psychological makeup. I'm referring here not to that. I'm referring to the type of existential fear that most people feel when there's something which is unknown, something which is a threat, something which is going to take away their happiness and their joy, and you are tortured by that fear or worry. Sometimes we call that worry. And it occupies a lot of your mental space, and it causes you significant anxiety and mental perturbation, and you become confused and disaffected and disturbed and unable to focus and panicked. And you can't shake it, and you start to live in a quagmire, and you just can't work your way out of it, and it has a very deleterious effect on your life. I don't have that kind of fear, and there's a couple of reasons. One of them is if you don't think you're going to die of the disease, even if you get it, then you won't be so afraid. I think I'm a reasonable candidate for getting super sick. I'm 48. I think I'm a reasonable candidate. I'm not personally particularly worried about it. I think I have a reasonably robust constitution. And, it's not a guarantee, but it's not, I don't think this is going to be what takes me out. And so that you could be an atheist and a materialist and be the most selfish person on the planet, but if you don't perceive it as an existential threat to yourself, then it's not going to give you fear. That's not what I'm talking about either. Now, you could also have this fear that your loved ones are going to die. So maybe you don't worry about yourself, either because you're selfless or because you don't perceive it as a threat, but you're still worried about your loved ones. And so you could be racked with fear about your loved ones and not about yourself. But it amounts to the same type of anxiety and worry and panic and just like perpetual discomfiture. I don't have that either. I don't have that either. And it's not because I don't care about people. It's not because I don't want to do everything in my power to address the massive pandemic and catastrophe which is waiting in the wings and looming in the darkness, looming in the night, waiting to enter. I think I'm pretty aware of how dangerous this situation is. But I'm not racked with fear about my loved ones. And certainly I can't protect them. I can't lock people up, stop their movements. I can preach to them maybe, to get on my soapbox and see what I can convince people of. Use all of my powers of persuasion to convince people to do the right thing. But I've learned so much that there's limits to that. I've had so many elegant and powerful lessons in life that I can't control other people. And so I'm concerned, and I'm sure that people I know have passed away. One of my gurus passed away. It's like losing an uncle / father. It's not a small thing. And he was in good health. The COVID is what he died of. He was in good health. So I've lost people. I've grieved. And I'm sure I'm going to lose more. I'm sure of that. I'm in doubt about that. But I'm not panicked for them. And it's not because I'm not It's not because I'm callous. It's not because I'm uncaring. I do care, but I'm not fearful. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about why I'm not afraid. And it's not because I'm doing everything in my power and I'm satisfied with that. I'm doing everything in my power to help my community. And I know that that's not enough. I'm not afraid because I understand that I'm not this body. And I understand that there's an all-good and all-powerful creator. And that means that there is a fair system in this world. And that people don't get things or suffer unnecessarily if they don't deserve it. And there is a basic level of justice and fairness in this world, because an arbitrary world would not be created by an all-good God. An all-powerful God could create a fair world where people got what they deserved and people had free will, and Krishna took people with their free will and matched them up with people who deserved to have something done to them. And I wanted to shoot somebody, and Krishna found somebody who deserved to get shot. I shot them, created my karma, exercised my free will, and that person who deserved to get shot was shot. They got their karma. I made my karma. An all-good God would want to make a world like that, because that's the best of all possible worlds. An all-powerful God could engineer a world like that. So, I understand that if I jump off a cliff and I crack my skull, that was my instant karma, to quote John Lennon, because of that foolish move I made that resulted in me instantaneously injuring myself. But if I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm living with integrity in my life, and I am behaving as a citizen in my community, and I'm living a life with integrity and nobility and dignity and honor and respect, and I'm faithful, and I do things properly, then whatever happens to me, I must have deserved. And I can own that. And whatever happens to my loved ones, and even strangers, they must have also deserved. Now, if it happens on my watch, someone's getting raped on my watch, well, it was their karma to have that happen to them on my watch, which means it's also my dharma to put myself in harm's way and save them. You follow? So I've got full enthusiasm to do my duty. And I can simultaneously hold that in tension with the understanding that I live in a world that was created by an all-good, all-powerful creator. That's the best of all possible worlds, where everything is fair and people don't get what they don't deserve. And if I'm doing everything properly and doing my duty properly, then whatever happens to me, I can accept that this is what had to happen. And I find peace in that. Now, that doesn't mean if somebody comes at me with a knife, I'm not going to feel fear and jump and move and attempt to protect myself. But it does mean that I sleep peacefully at night. I don't stay awake. I don't live in a dangerous world. I live, there's that famous Irish toast or prayer. May the road rise up to meet you. May the road rise up to meet you. So like if you're walking down like a steep hill or something like that, the road rise up to meet you. It's more of a flat walk, right? May the road rise up to meet you. And may the wind be always at your back. Because if the wind's at your back, it's easier to run. Like if you ever run with the wind at your back, you run faster. You almost might trip, you can run so fast. May the wind be always at your back. It makes running easy. And may the rain fall gently on your fields. Because you need rain to grow your crops. But these storms destroy your crops. And so if the rain falls gently on your fields, that means that they're getting the water they need, but it's not creating any disturbance. In the Vedas, it's auspicious if it rains at night. You sleep, you wake up, your crops are all watered, you have a beautiful sunny day. May the road rise up to meet you, may the wind be always at your back, and may the rain fall gently upon your fields. And may God hold you in the palm of his hand till I see you again. It's my experience that I'm being held in the hand of Krishna. And that's enough for me. I'm peaceful. I'm good. I'm okay. I'll take what comes and I'll navigate as best I can. That's also my dharma, is to navigate and to work with what I'm given. But I'm good. I'm okay. I'm solid. I'm peaceful. I'm happy. I'm satisfied. I'm tranquil. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of dying, and I'm also not afraid of death. I've seen some death. I've helped a lot of people die. I've watched people die from the time I was young. My friend died right in front of me when I was 15, got shot to death. I've seen people die. I've had people overdose when I was a teenager. Real close friends of mine died of overdoses. My own brother died of an overdose. I've helped my grandparents die. I've helped my aunts and uncles die. I've helped my friends die. I've helped my congregation die. I've had students who've died. Like real, like disciples. Like actual, like full-on students. I'm not looking for death. I don't have a death wish. But I'm okay. I'm good. And as I'm thinking about these things, visceral fear as a reaction versus existential fear as fear of the unknown, which is ultimately linked to a chaotic worldview where God is not all powerful and can't help you, or is not all good. It's like a dystheistic deity who doesn't want to help you. As I start to kind of cure myself of those doubts, or as I have cured myself of those doubts, by the association of the great souls that I follow, by the boat of our scriptures, by the blessings of the deities, by my own spiritual practice, all these things conspire together to inoculate me from fear. That existential fear that's pernicious and difficult to rout out and so taxing for people. I think of a verse. And so that's what I want to discuss. So I didn't have a chance to discuss in my... Anyway, I know the verse by heart. It's the first verse I ever memorized. Samasrita ye pada palava plava mahat pudam punya yasho murare bhavam budir vatsa padam param padam 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 yad vipadam natesham. Samasrita ye, for those who've taken shelter. Pada palava plavam, for those who've taken shelter of the boat of the Lord's lotus feet. Palava doesn't really mean lotus, it means like sprout or buds. But like the Lord's lotus feet are like soft and like very tender. So pada is where you like tripod. That's from the Sanskrit pada. So I have a verse here. I can break it down. So pada palava plavam. Pada palava plavam. Plava means boat. Pada palava means the sprouts of the feet, the boat that's made up of your sprouting feet. It's like of your tender feet. I guess if you were going to render it into English, you would say the boat of your tender feet. For those who've taken shelter of that, Mahat Padam, and your feet are the abode of the universe. Mahat means the universe in this context. They're the Mahat Pada. They're the abode of the universe. So your lotus feet are the abode of the universe. So I'm taking shelter of your soft lotus feet. It's like very intimate, right? But those lotus feet are powerful. So it's like there's this Madhurya, this sweetness, and then this Aishwarya. Side by side. They're married together in the verse. So I'm taking shelter of your tender, sweet, easily approachable lotus feet. You follow? That's holding you in the palm. Like very, very caring, right? Very easy to do. So easy. They're just right there. The Lord's feet are just right there. Take shelter of them. What's stopping you? But then those lotus feet are mahatpadam. And this pada, pada and pa is repeated over and over again. Samasita ye pada palava plavam mahatpadam punya yashomurai bhavam budir vatsap padam param padam 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 nadvi padam natesham. Over and over again. This in Sanskrit, this is like the equivalent of rhyming. They don't do it like the rhyming at the end of each verse, but throughout the verse they'll have the same syllable repeated again and again, and it sounds very melodious and poetic to the ear. It's Sanskrit alliteration. Poetics. So for those who've taken shelter of your tender lotus feet, which are simultaneously the shelter of the universe, the resting place of the universe. Pada can mean resting place, in addition to feet. You follow? For those people who've taken shelter, Punya Yasha Murare, and you're famous for your virtuous acts. So the Lord is famous for his virtue. Punya Yasha. He's famous for his virtue. And he's Murari. He is the killer of Mura. Adi means enemy. Mura is the name of a demon. And this actually is a little bit intimate. Murari, the gopis a lot of times will call Krishna Murari. Krishna killed the Mura demon before killing Narakasur, who was holding Krishna's 16,000 queens captive. And so Krishna romantically, as a hero, rescuing damsels in distress. Krishna, in that mood, he's Murari. He's the enemy of Mura, who was the demon guarding the moat around the castle that Narakasur was in, holding these women captive. And Krishna killed that demon, who was super fierce, and then he killed Narakasur, also known as Baumasur, because he's the son of Bhumi Devi. So Baumas, the son of Bhumi, and he rescued his queens. And so it's a name that Krishna gets called often by the gopis. So there's a certain sweetness. There's the power, and then there's also the sweetness. And this idea that, Punya Yasha, that Krishna is virtuous. He's famous for being virtuous. Just at least today it reminds me that Krishna's all good, and therefore he would never do something to me that I hadn't created for myself. Krishna never arbitrarily visit ill on me, and nor would he neglect me. We have heroic compassion. We would give our lives to protect somebody. Wouldn't Krishna? Wouldn't an all-good, all-powerful deity have that same quality? So Krishna would not let us suffer unfairly or unnecessarily if we hadn't created that for ourselves at some time in the past and it wasn't required for us to learn. Punya Yasha, he's famous for his virtue. Murari, he rescued the damsels. He rescues the devotees. You follow? You see, there's this mood, right? You can still hear? Pujari? Bhava Ambudir. Bhava Ambudi. The ocean of material life. Now, Krishna's feet are like a boat. So what do you do with a boat? You cross an ocean. There's a Bhava Ambuda. There's a ocean of Bhava, which means material life. Bhava literally means existence. Material existence. It comes from the Sanskrit root bu, which is roughly equivalent to the English verb to be. So it's like the ocean of being, the ocean of existence, the ocean of material existence. So, Bhavam Buddhi, Vatsa Padam. That boat allows you to cross over the ocean of material life, because it's a boat that allows you to cross over. But no. That boat of the Lord's lotus feet makes the ocean of existence seem like Vatsa Padam. Makes it seem like the footprint of a calf. Vatsa is a calf. Vatsapada is a calf foot. Very, very small. A calf hoof print. It's the size of our sika, it's supposed to be. It's about that big. A calf's hoof print. It's about that big. So the Lord's lotus feet are like a boat to help you cross the ocean, but then that ocean also becomes like the indentation of a calf's foot. Where's the danger? There's no danger there. The water that's in a calf's footprint, no one's going to drown in that. No one's going to drown. I read somewhere that one of the grown men who escaped the Titanic, no grown men should have escaped the Titanic because it means they took a spot that was meant for a woman or a child. They didn't have enough boats. And so the real men went down with the ship. And the cowards saved themselves and sacrificed women and children. So I read a story. I don't even know if it's true. I never researched it. I'll probably go research it tonight. But some guy escaped the Titanic. And he ended up drowning to death in a puddle outside a pub. Which is just classic poetic justice, if it happened. And so, a cowardly death for a coward, you know? A petty death for a petty person. So, there's no danger because it's just like the water. Even you couldn't even drown if you tried. The water in a cask. It's like a shot glass or something like that. It's a couple of ounces of water. It's nothing. And so it's a dual metaphor. The Lord's lotus feet are a boat, so it helps you cross the ocean of material existence, bhagavadgita. But then it also simultaneously shrinks that ocean of existence down to the water in a calf's footprint. Samasritaye, for those who've taken shelter, pada palava plavam, of the Lord's lotus, tender lotus-like feet that are a boat. For those people, Mahat Padam, those lotus feet are also the shelter of the whole universe. Punya Yasha, and they're famous for their virtue, therefore they never let anything bad happen to you. It was ultimately you getting something you needed. Murari, and he rescues his devotees. He never fails to rescue his devotees. He's the enemy of the bad and the champion of the good. And what's the result of that boat? Bhavambudi, the ocean of material suffering. You can cross because you have a boat. But no, that ocean, vatsapadam, it becomes like the foot of a calf. The Lord's lotus feet make the ocean of material existence seem like the foot of a calf. You follow? Because they're the shelter of the universe. All using this pada. The Lord's pada, his feet, are the pada, the shelter of the universe, the resting place of the universe. And they make the ocean seem like a calf's hoof print. It's beautiful, right? Padam padam na vipadam. Padam padam yad vipadam. Vipada means danger. V modifies pada, so it means danger. So pada means place also. It means place, it means foot, it means shelter. Parampadam, those feet are parampadam, they're the supreme destination. The Lord's lotus feet are parampadam, they're the supreme destination. They make the ocean of material suffering seem like vatsapada, the hoof print of a calf. Why? Because they're mahatpada, because they are the resting place, the place of the whole universe, the resting place of the whole universe. He's sheltering the whole universe. Surely he can shelter you. And he's virtuous, and he's loving. He's romantically available. He killed Mura to protect his damsels. He'll also protect you. He's famous for his virtue. Padam padam yad vipadam. Pada pada, step by step, there is danger. Natesham, not for you. Not for those people who have taken shelter of the Lord. Parampadam, the supreme abode, heaven, Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, is their destination. Not this world where there's danger at every step. Over and over, this word pada is repeated. Pa and pada, both. The Lord's lotus feet, pada, are the place, pada, that the whole universe rests on. Those lotus feet are parampadam. They are the supreme destination. Navipadam, not dangerous, not this place of danger. Padam padam, at every step, this world which has danger at every step. Because those lotus feet make the whole ocean the material world. Not only are they a boat to cross it, but they make that ocean like the water in a calf's hoofprint. First verse I ever memorized. I believe this verse. Not because I have faith in our scriptures, which I do have. I have faith in our scriptures. But I believe this verse because I believe that there's an all-good, all-powerful deity. And this verse perfectly poeticizes what would be the natural, automatic, necessary features of having an all-good, all-powerful deity that created the world. A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. If I read this verse in another religion, I would still believe it. Because it's fundamentally true, because this verse must be true if an all-good and all-powerful deity exists. And because I've done the math on that one, then when I look at a verse like this, it reminds me of what I already believe, and it teases out and traces out and explores and celebrates and unpacks the automatic necessary ramifications of believing in an all-good, all-powerful deity. I have faith in our scriptures, but I don't need that faith to appreciate this verse, because the verse makes perfect sense. For this reason, I'm not afraid. I'm not like perfect. But I've been around for a minute, and at least I figured this one out. And I find the verse to be comforting. And if you have doubts, the verse is challenging. It challenges your doubts. Makes you think about your doubts. Makes them hard to maintain. And if you have faith, the verse is comforting. It's comforting in any situation, including this one. This world's not my home. I'm meant for something bigger, as are all of you. Whether we get taken out by this or the next one, we all leave this place. We all have to let go. We all have to move on. That's obvious. That's self-evident. If you're doing that work in your life, and then when things like this come along, you're able to take them in stride. You're able to use them to your advantage. You're able to go to a deeper place. You're able to make it work for you. And that doesn't mean nobody dies. It just means you're able to see the bigger picture and find solace in that. Ultimately, in theology, in my faith in divinity, I find solace. I find truth. I find an anchor, something I can tether myself to in this fundamentally ephemeral world where nothing is stable. There's one thing that's stable, and that's the mercy of God, and also for me, the community of devotees I'm a part of. I anchor myself to my elders who are otherworldly in their imbibing of our tradition, in their representing our tradition in their life. And by anchoring myself to them, I also become strong. And I try to uplift the people following behind me so they can also get that same blessing and become strong as well. And the root of that strength that comes from the bhakti lata, from the vine of devotion is that it tethers itself to the lotus feet of Krishna, which is the immovable object and unstoppable force that we're all looking for. And so that's explicated in this verse, and I wanted to spend a little time unpacking it. I couldn't do it in the time I had on Instagram, and so I did it tonight for you guys. Thank you very much. We'll do a little kirtan now, and we'll do the arti, we'll do a little kirtan for a few minutes. And thank you very much. You'll get the chance to see the deities in just a second. Hare Krishna.